The Epitomes against the Heresy of the Filioque by St. Photios the Great. Chapters of Patriarch Photios against the followers of Old Rome, showing that the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father alone and not from the Son. If the Spirit is indeed simple, but proceeds from the Father and the Son, then these two would certainly be considered one person, and there would be introduced here a Sabellian fusion, or better to say, a semi-Sabellian fusion. If indeed the Holy Spirit does proceed from the Father and the Son, he would be altogether double and composite. If the Holy Spirit is ascribed to two principles, where will the much hymned monarchy be? If the Father and the Son both originate the Spirit, the Father will be both the direct and indirect originator of the Spirit on account of his proceeding also from the Son. Certainly, if the procession of the Holy Spirit from the Father is perfect, then that from the Son is superfluous. If the Son has the property of originating the Spirit like the Father, the property of origination will be common to both. But how will the property be shared in common? If by opposition, will not one destroy the other? For contraries are destructive of one another. If by divergence, then part of the Spirit will proceed in one way and part in another, and he will be composed of unequal parts. If indeed both the Son and the Spirit have come forth from one cause, namely the Father, and the Son again originates the Spirit, then the Spirit should also originate the Son. For the Father and originator brought forth both with equal honor. If indeed the Son does share with the Father in originating the Holy Spirit, then the Holy Spirit will also share in it. For all that the Father has in common with the Son, he also has in common with the Holy Spirit. Hence, he will be at the same time cause and caused, which thing is more monstrous than the fables of the pagan Greeks. If the Son has the power of origination, but the Spirit is denied it, he is inferior in power to the Son, which was the insanity of Macedonius. They allege as an excuse, however, that Ambrose wrote thus in his treatises concerning the subject, as did also Augustine and Jerome. One must say in defense of these men that perhaps the Pneumatomatians corrupted their writings, or perhaps they spoke according to the tactics used by the great Basil, who for a time refrained from preaching the divinity of the Holy Spirit. Or perhaps they, since they were only human, had been led astray from sound theology. For many great men, like Dionysius of Alexandria, Methodius of Patara, and Pierius, Pamphiliotus, Theognostos, and Irenaeus of Lugdunum, with his disciple Hippolytus, have suffered so in certain things. For we do not accept some of their statements, although we greatly admired the rest. So Ambrose, Augustine, and Jerome said what the Romans claim, but the hierarchs of the 7 ecumenical councils did not. All the ecumenical councils in succession confirmed the definition of our faith. The leaders and lights of the Roman Church agreed with them without any contradiction, and decreed that it was not permitted to add or subtract anything from the aforesaid definition of the faith, and that he who dared to do so should absolutely be cast out of the Church. Divine Gregory the Dialogist, who flourished not long after the 6th ecumenical council, preached and wrote in Latin that the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father alone. Zacharias, 165 years later, translated the dialogues into Greek and said, quote, "The Comforter Spirit proceeds from the Father and abides in the Son," end quote. For he had been taught this by the forerunner, who saw the Spirit descending like a dove and abiding upon him. Leo and Benedict, great hierarchs of Rome in latter times, decreed that the symbol of faith be recited in Greek at the sacred rites in Rome, and the other churches subject to her, lest the inadequacy of the Latin furnish an occasion for blasphemy. This Leo, when he had opened the treasury of the Apostolic Church of the Romans, brought forth 2 shields, which have been preserved among the other sacred heirlooms, and which were engraved with the pious exposition of the faith in Greek letters and words, and which he ordered to be read before the entire Roman people. Up to the time of the pious Patriarch of Constantinople, Sergius, the Roman high priests sent confirmatory letters of their belief at the beginning of their high priesthood to all the patriarchal sees, and in these letters they inscribed the symbol of faith without any variation. But what need is there to say much? The Son and Master reveals that, quote, the Spirit proceeds from the Father, end quote, John 15:26. And likewise, great Paul declares, saying, quote, but though we, or an angel from heaven, preach any other gospel unto you than that which we have preached unto you, let him be anathema, end quote, Galatians 1:8. And who will ask for another teacher unless he be patently insane? When David said, quote, by the Spirit of his mouth, end quote, he taught also that the Spirit proceeds from the Father alone, since he applies the phrase, quote, of his mouth, end quote, to the Father, not to the Son, in order that he might destroy by anticipation the blasphemy of those who hold that the Spirit proceeds also from the Son. In all other cases, procession denotes symbol egris, as when it is said in the Psalms, quote, he went forth and spake in a like manner, end quote, Psalm 46. But the procession of the Holy Spirit from the Father does not signify simply egris, which is accidental, coming to pass and then ceasing, but it is an essential and natural procession, signifying the mode of being and declaring the subsistence of the Holy Spirit, who is not by generation, as is the Son, but by procession, in his own proper manner. For the characteristic property of the Son is to be begotten by nature from the Father, but the characteristic property of the Holy Spirit is to proceed by nature from the Father. They differ from each other only thus, namely, in the characteristic property of subsistence, while in the other respects they are one in essence, in nature, in dignity, and in power, and, to put it simply, one in everything else, both with the Father and with each other. How then do you say that the Holy Spirit proceeds, quote, from the Father and from the Son, end quote? If, as cause, lo, then there are two causes and two principles, Father and Son, and you are advocating a diarchy rather than a monarchy. But it is not our task to speak about the many absurdities following from this belief. However, if the Spirit proceeds in another way, as if from the mutual linking by reason of the reciprocal indwelling and interchange of the other properties, and to speak simply, proceeds as if being sent, then you are sound in your understanding. For just as the Father sends the Son, so does the Son send the Spirit. Quote, but when he, end quote, he says, quote, the Comforter is come, whom I will send unto you from the Father, even the Spirit of truth, which proceeds from the Father, he shall testify of me, end quote. Nevertheless, you err in another respect. First, in changing and falsifying through this addition the exposition of faith confirmed by the 7 ecumenical councils, and no one but you has done it. Secondly, that and which you interpolate between the two phrases, and which we are accustomed to call a conjunction, implies the meaning of equal procession from both the Father and the Son, even though you might understand the procession from the Son in another way, just as we said above. One ought, however, not only to think correctly, but also not to scandalize others. For if he who gives scandal to one person has been judged worthy of a fearful punishment, according to the Gospels, what punishment will they deserve who have scandalized almost the entire world? When God the Son was speaking concerning the Holy Spirit, he said not once, but twice in the course of the same speech that the Holy Spirit is, quote, from the Father, end quote, John 15:26. Why did he not say, quote, and from me, end quote? Our opponents replied that he was speaking humbly as a man. But we, quickly answering, convict them at once of a lie. The words, quote, whom I will send unto you, end quote, were not spoken as man, but rather as God. For a man does not send God, if the Holy Spirit is indeed God. Therefore, twice he said, quote, from the Father, end quote, in order to confirm such a sublime utterance and to stop the mouths of those who in the future would say that the Spirit proceeds from the Son.